Evening all, how are you doing? Great news today. We can do a favourite thing of mine. It's a hobby, perhaps you could call it, which is slag off Keir Starmer. Obviously, we haven't done that for a while, have we?
Gay!
There you go, I owed you that one. Yeah, so the Prime Minister, what a knobhead. He's obviously trying to slither us in back into the European Union via the back door because why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he? Also, he's something of an expert when it comes to slithering in through the back door, if you know what I'm talking about. So we're going to go through this story off GB News. Listen to the inestimable Jacob Rees-Mogg, who perhaps uniquely among the Conservative Party these days is, I think, the only one of them that I can stomach to listen to, and then explain in no uncertain terms why the rent boy enjoyer, if there is any justice in the world, will one of these days, if the gods are good, end up getting guillotined somewhere public, somewhere good. Maybe send him up on the London Eye and do it at the Apex so everyone can see. Whatever proves the most popular. We will have to check with economic experts, obviously, before we do such a thing, because at this point, it may well tank the Ukrainian economy. People that pay attention know exactly why that is. Right, then let's get into this one. Fears Keir Starmer's EU reset. I'll stop you there, lads. I'll stop you there. It's not a fear. It's happening. It's happening. Jacob Rees-Mogg lays it out in no uncertain terms, but I'll give you the abridged version.
Sir Keir Starmer is proving what we already knew, that his ambition and that of his government is to reverse Brexit dishonestly. The Prime Minister is again proving himself to be what George Canning called a steady patriot of the world alone, the friend of every country but his own. Today it's been revealed that new legislation is being drafted to transfer some post-Brexit laws that the EU make to take over British law, giving the European blob powers to legislate for us. The bill would, for the first time since Brexit, make Parliament cede control over key areas to foreign bureaucrats. Food standards, farming rules, animal welfare, pesticides are all on track to be determined in Brussels under what's being called dynamic alignment, which means being told what to do. This means that when the EU changes its rules, our laws will automatically change too. We'd have no vote, no veto, and no say. We would be expected to obey orders. In some cases, Britain would fall under the authority of the European Court of Justice, a foreign and political court that could then overrule British people's laws on British soil. It's not cooperation or diplomacy. It's deference and supplication to a supranational body, essentially making ourselves a colony of the EU, run being governed by the people we voted for.
Now, Jacob continues quite eloquently, but I don't want to listen to the whole 4 minutes. I'll put a link down there. I think GB News is behind a paywall if you want to watch all of it. And I pay for it. There's the Telegraph and GB News I give money to in a desperate attempt to at least bolster some of the, what would you call them, centrist media organisations in the UK. I mean, GB News isn't even right-wing, is it? Benjamin Butterworth's always on there. Who wants to listen to him talking? He's just basically Owen Jones with worse eyesight. Anyway, the meat of what Jacob said is neatly explained in a few diagrams, which were compiled by Facts for EU in collaboration with Stand for Our Sovereignty. And they reveal the scale of the changes coming down the chute, which will affect 500,000 UK businesses involved in the food, farming and ancillary sectors. If you pay attention, you don't really need to sit and go through all the charts, because you're well aware that as soon as our slippery Weasley MPs get involved and name things like dynamic alignment, what that is newspeak for backroom shenanigans by out Europhiles that have always been out Europhiles and have happily told us so. This isn't some sort of weird conspiracy theory. All of our MPs came out as pro-EU, including most of the Conservative Party. And when they finally bowed to endless public pressure forced upon them, you have to give the credit to the man where it's due, by old frogface Farage, they only gave the public a referendum after they'd essentially already lost 5 votes on the matter. Because every time anything related to an EU referendum was put on the ballot, the public lapped it up. Cameron won when he won his general election to get away from the coalition with Cleggy. He won a majority because he promised to give the public a vote on Brexit. Johnson the same. He only won a big majority because he promised to get it done. And then they still danced around the issue and desperately tried to undo it all. I think that was the start of the general public, especially for myself, but most of the general public's disillusionment and disgust with the powers that be, because we told them and told them and told them, and they still didn't want to do it. So those of you that have been engaged in politics for the last few years, none of this is news or conspiratorial. They hate you because they hate Brexit and you voted for it. They have revulsion for the general public. They think you should do as you're told, which is why they ignored you when you told them and won the referendum, and they lost fair and square by 1 million votes, and they still didn't want to do it, did they? So this isn't like some out there conspiracy theory. It's a demonstrable fact proved by the data. So no matter what slimy, oily, Machiavellian scheming the androgynous android gets up to slithering through the corridors of power in Brussels, you know this is happening. They will drag you back into the EU, kicking and screaming. Anyway, rant over, back to the numbers at hand. The EU already earns a £31 billion surplus from its food and drink trade with the UK. We know all this. The EU was only ever good for them, the maggots in Brussels. UK exports a relatively trifling £14 billion worth of goods to the EU, but we buy £45 billion, giving them a surplus of £31 billion, obviously. Therefore, the existing arrangement already benefits the EU, which raises serious questions over what's in it for Britain. Exports of food and drink are particularly meagre, representing just 0.5% of UK GDP. So despite the fact they're 0.5% of our GDP, 500,000 UK businesses are going to be impacted, and the list goes on. They then list a gigantic laundry list of issues that are regulations and directives which you, because some of you are going to be business owners, aren't you, are going to be having to obey next year, and they'll be ruthlessly enforced by an iron fist, which is one of the reasons why we always hated the European Union, didn't we? The British always chafed at the collar, the leash imposed upon it by Brussels, because as we all know, the British are sticklers for the rules. We always have been. It's in our blood. It's why the Royal Navy took over the whole world seas, because of iron discipline and rules and regulations that we all followed. Whereas the frogs, if they see a rule they don't like, they ignore it. The Italians, the Spaniards, we've known this continental system since long before Napoleon imposed it. If they don't like rules in Europe, they ignore them. We like rules. We like to do things by the book. Hence terms like, it's just not cricket. It's in our blood. So when a frog or a Spaniard or an Itai sees a rule he doesn't like, he just ignores it. While us, silly bastards that we are, we go, whoa, hang on, you can't do that. It's against the rules. It's just not cricket, dear boy. Just one of many reasons why we are completely unsuited to the European Union. So these rules, you'll be obeying them, but Francois and Mario won't be. Christ on a bike. Everything they do is an act of self-harm in Parliament these days. So anyway, I won't bore you with this. It's just all shite. Directives and regulation that the frogs and the Germans won't play by anyway. John Redwood, again, perhaps the second MP that occasionally says something sensible, especially when it's related to the European Union. He said, and I'm quoting him, "The government has no idea how to negotiate or grow the economy. In a hopeless attempt to increase our tiny food exports to the EU, they propose to land our large and successful domestic food industry with extra costs and damaging rules which will hit their competitiveness and ability to innovate. The government's giving in to EU demands to pay them money and accept their laws. They never even ask them to pay us money and continue their access to our very lucrative market, or to adopt UK laws which are better for business. It's not building a partnership, but by stealth gradually making us a colony of the EU, paying them tribute and doing what they tell us to do." So there you go. And obviously Redwood is a serious politician. He's not, that isn't a stupid or hyperbolic thing to say, and it has the ring of truth to it, doesn't it? Because, I mean, we've talked about this before, the obvious when it comes to trade. Just like the Americans with the Canadians and the Mexicans, this is why Trump's tariffs worked for him. Because something like 70% of everything Canada sells goes to the United States. So when he starts playing hardball, the Canadians haven't got any room to manoeuvre. Same for the Mexicans. almost everything they sell goes to the United States. So if the United States stops buying off them, they're in bother, aren't they? Clearly, I mean, the food and drink chart's even worse. They barely buy anything off us anyway. But we pull in 50 billion quid's worth of gear from the EU. And as you're all aware, Starmer, this came straight out of his own mouth, his own lying, horrible, dirty mouth. These words passed across his own forked tongue only in January. He said he was ready for closer EU alignment in the national interest. Well, that's his opinion. There's the quote. The Prime Minister told the BBC's Laura Kussenberg it would be better looking to the single market rather than the customs union for our further alignment. And he ruled out revisiting manifesto promises not to rejoin the EU single market, which doesn't sound very good for you, does it? So to sum up, the rent boy enjoyer is going to rejoin the EU by stealth. He'll just covertly align the UK with all of the rules and regulations that the nation was subject to while they were in the European Union, and they'll keep paying them money, and you're going to keep having no control over your borders because you're pissing money up the wall, giving it to France, and then the coppers just sit there smoking tabs and drinking wine while they all jump on the dinghies and come over anyway. Basically, the man is a treacherous cur, and that's all there is to it. If you disagree, please let me know in the comments. Please let me know one positive thing about having a maggot like that squatting in 10 Downing Street, because I can't think of one. If you can, you're a better man than me. Have at it in the comments. Anyway, let me know what you think. I will put a link down there in the comments. That might be behind a paywall. I'll also link to this BBC piece so you can read the rat bastard's lies all for yourself. And I'll see you all tomorrow. All right, thanks for tuning in. Toodle pip. Cheers.